What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review episode 3 of The Idol, an episode called Daybreak, which is named after the last song composed by the fictional character Jocelyn before her mom got sick and passed away from cancer. But the episode was written and directed by Sam Levinson and based on an overall story by Sam Levinson and The Weeknd. And we are officially at the halfway point through this season, and I think whether you love it, hate it, or are still divided on it, I think we know what we're dealing with, what's good, what's bad. But what surprised me this episode was that I felt like there was a real turning point in that last big dinner scene where suddenly I was impressed with The Weeknd's acting ability. I've been a little critical of his acting ability up till now just because I feel like he's less experienced than a lot of the rest of the cast. But that dinner scene went to so many surprising places emotionally and had so many interesting revelations and kind of disturbing moments. I feel like for the people who've been sticking with this show, I feel like that scene makes all the effort and the patience totally worth it. And I have no problem acknowledging that some of the more kind of disturbing or risque elements to this show are the bait that lure us in. Like, a little skin here and there will attract an audience. But the reward is getting really good, interesting, fascinating scenes like that dinner scene where I just couldn't believe where we got to see how Tedros went from a position of relative lack of confidence where he kind of didn't know what he was talking about, where he seemed to be out of his depth when it came to going head-to-head with Jocelyn, about the potential rewards of taking a risk versus playing it safe, because honestly, he is not experienced in the music biz. He knows a lot about music, but she's obviously been in the business for a very long time. But when the episode got to that breakthrough moment where Jocelyn acknowledged that as much as she loathed and despised her mother for beating her with a hairbrush throughout her entire childhood to get out of bed, to learn her dance moves, to remember her lines, anything and everything, and she would break the skin. I mean, this is real physical and emotional abuse. There's no two ways about it. But then came the moment in the scene that absolutely knocked me flat, where due to Tedros' emotional manipulation or urging or prodding, Jocelyn acknowledges and admits that part of her fear is that she is stuck creatively because her abusive mother is no longer around to motivate her to reach those heights. And I just couldn't believe that it had gone there. Once again, maybe in my own way, I've also kind of written off the show as just kind of good, sleazy fun, like a good music video. And I haven't really demanded of it that it go into unexpected emotional depth or terrain or whatever the case might be. And so I think over the long term, Sam Levinson and The Weeknd, they're going to have the last laugh. I think this show is going to stick with people for a good long while. Because that entire conversation over the dinner table about when is a risk actually a risk, because if it's a calculated risk, if it's the right risk at the right time, then it's not a risk. And I feel like that whole attitude can apply to music, to film, to television, basically any creative endeavor. And I was not expecting this show to make me think deeply about the nature of risk versus creativity. And I feel like that scene invites so many interesting conversations about entertainment on the whole. Like this summer, we're in the middle of the summer blockbuster season where we're seeing a lot of movies based on toys or comic books or video games or popular franchises from a long time ago, but very few original movies that you could actually say are taking a risk. There's one original big budget movie this summer, and that is Oppenheimer. That's not based on some sort of pre-existing IP. So when it comes to movies, big budget movies, very few people are taking any sort of creative risks. And so what I found so, exciting and such a relief about this show is people debate its merits or lack thereof, or where it's inappropriate or where it's crossing the line. At a minimum, we're having debates about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which is such a refreshing change of pace. We're not sitting around saying, this interpretation of this superhero character that was invented 70 years ago, I didn't like what they did with it. We're actually having a debate about adult themes and adult topics and disturbing behavior and abusive behavior. And that's so much more exciting and so much more interesting than just constantly having debates about pop culture from stuff from decades ago. So I just want to say it one more time. My hat's off to Sam Levinson and The Weeknd for taking a big risk. Will the risk completely, totally pay off? No, I think the show is flawed. It is inconsistent. But when it works, holy shit, it works really well. And so when I see critics and reviewers dismissing this show as a rape fantasy, I just want to say, grow up. Clearly, you've not even given the show a chance, not even watched the episode. It's more complex than the way you're describing it. And just, once again, HBO would not invest millions of dollars into a fucking rape fantasy. That's totally ridiculous. People have just gotten so accustomed to watching kind of dumbed down, fangless, toothless, clawless, family-friendly entertainment, they don't even know how to have a conversation about something that takes them into uncomfortable territory. And I think this show is making a lot of people uncomfortable because the audience shrank apparently between episode 1 and episode 2. I think it's around 800,000, which would make it about as popular as a show like Barry. Like HBO loves a show to be somewhere between like 2 and 3 million, a show like Succession. I don't think the show was ever designed to be possibly renewed, although it is part of the fictional setting of Euphoria. I don't know if we're going to get more shows set in that world or not. And I don't really know how The Weeknd will look at it in terms of like, how will he measure it as a success? Because he's using this show to drop singles every week. That song last week, Family, featuring Mike Dean and Susanna Son, I downloaded it. I mean, I'm 46 years old. I don't download a lot of pop music, but I actually downloaded that song and listened to it several times. And the fact that this show has got me even listening to pop music again is a minor miracle. And speaking of taking creative risk, I mean, Susanna Son in that last episode shows buck-ass nude playing the piano, and she's a marvelous composer and an excellent singer. She's on a tightrope without a net beneath her as well. I feel like everybody on this show, they're putting their careers on the line. They're taking some risks. And so I applaud them for taking a big risk with their careers, because as an industry as a whole, the entertainment industry takes so few. So I think at a minimum, the show deserves a pat on the back for making the attempt. As it states at the beginning of every episode, viewer discretion is advised. And to that, I can only respond, hallelujah. Viewer fucking discretion is advised. And that's the way I want all my shows and movies to be. But let's get into some of the details of the episode. I think the first 10 or 15 minutes is going to provide abundant ammunition to those people who fucking hate the show or who are critical of this show. I mean, it opens up with Jocelyn and Tedros blasting down, I think, Rodeo Boulevard, and basically they're going through Beverly Hills beside all this palm trees. So what that iconic street, I've lived in LA back in 99 to 06, but I can't remember the name of that road. But she's straddling him as they drive, and he's going down on her, and she's clearly having fun. She's young, she's in love, she's having fun again. I mean, she even says that later in the episode. Thank you for helping me learn to have fun again. And, this is pure kind of masturbatory fantasies for the viewer. I mean, you've got Jocelyn walking around in skimpy shorts, showing off her ass and thighs and that sort of thing. And ordinarily in film and television, I absolutely loathe and despise shopping sequences. It's just pure wealth porn. And I think I've gone shopping on my own 10 times in my life. I fucking hate shopping. I don't want to see it in film and television. I don't give a damn about shopping. But we do get a few little details worth mentioning. And I feel like this is where the show was at its weakest, or The Weeknd's acting was at its weakest. Like when Tedros is threatening a guy who works at the store for looking at Jocelyn. And I understand what they're going for in terms of trying to reveal certain aspects of his character, but I just felt like the scene didn't play particularly well. And while all this is going on, we're getting some scenes where Leia is talking to Chaim about all the problems she's having with Tedros. Now he's basically taken over the house, how he's fired the cook, how it's his way or the highway, to use a cheap cliche. He even uses the dreaded R word when he says that she's fucking retarded and that he's running the show now. And it's really aggressive, abusive, cult-like behavior. When you're in a cult-like environment, you have a figurehead and everything trickles down from that person. And clearly that's the person that Tedros wants to be. And if you watch the little kind of video behind the scenes look at the episode after the episode, you see Sam Levinson talking about how Jocelyn's basically making a switch from one cult to another cult. Both cults are kind of siphoning off of her and draining her and leeching her. She's got the talent, and everybody else is relying upon her to make their money and to survive, etc., and so forth. And basically, they need her to supply the talent that they do not possess. But anytime you're switching from one cult to another, the previous cult is going to get threatened, which is why you have Destiny, Chaim, I think I'm saying his name correctly, and Leia very, very concerned. And I can already imagine all the things that are going to be set up with the scene where he describes how he's improving her taste. She accuses him of being gay. He says, I ain't gay. And he starts slapping her ass, slapping her face, pulling her panties down. And perhaps everything people say about how they're going to object to that scene might be true. However, I think what they're going to overlook is the chess match for dominance between these two characters. And I think Sam Levinson maybe last week said that the whole season is an elaborate chess match between these two people, kind of seeking to get the upper hand over the other. And when they're having sex, she does the thing where she says, don't come on me. And she pulls away from him, leaving him frustrated, forcing him to basically jack off in the corner like a goddamn teenager. And she's laughing at him. And so I think people will oversimplify this show and just say, well, she's on the receiving end of all these rape fantasies. But once again, I think there's an oversimplification of what is going on. Even if I'm willing to admit that these scenes, like the early shopping scenes, are a little clumsy in their execution. But then the episode started getting a little more interesting when Chaim and Destiny are grilling Tedros about his background and where he's from. And he claims he's from Hollywood, and Destiny's from Hollywood. And all of her questions about where he grew up and where he went to school, he kind of fumbles through his answers. You can tell he's hiding quite a bit. And obviously he's insecure about the fact that he's new to the music biz. He obviously loves music, knows a lot about it. And he claims he's got Mike D coming in to produce some songs. And of course, that hits me right here because when I was 10, Licensed to Ill came out. I mean, yeah, for a brief shining moment, I was a Beastie Boys fanatic, and I feel like Mike D, it's a fucking icon from that period. But Chaim and Destiny agreed to give them a little bit of space, 2 weeks to work with. If they can produce 3 hit songs, not just songs, but 3 hits, then like it'll have been worth like the time and the risk and the gamble of taking a chance on Tedros as kind of the new consigliere or the new creative director for Jocelyn. And speaking of creative director, I thought one of the best scenes all season so far was when Tedros and Xander are having a conversation about the music biz. And Tedros is just exasperated. It's like, how come everybody in this industry is working on stuff that they hate? And Xander is like perfectly willing to acknowledge that they make a lot of kind of manufactured, artificial bad girl music, and that Jocelyn's latest song is kind of a non-event in a lot of ways. And then he pitches a really cool idea, or at least a really cool idea from Tedros' point of view. Xander manages to impress him. He says, look, if I were in charge, if I were really in charge and got to make some decisions, I would take the scandalous picture of her with cum on her face and make that the cover of her new album. And Xander's like, whew, like you could tell that caught him off guard. And he's like, hey, you want to do some cocaine? And Xander says, no, he doesn't like to do cocaine from LA because it all has fentanyl in it. And Xander's like, yeah, like not my coke. So those two guys, at least creatively, have now bonded. But throughout the episode, we get some interesting details. We see that Diane is now shooting the music video that was supposed to feature Jocelyn, but same choreography, same set, same director. I mean, Nikki clearly is like, you know what? I'm putting all my chips on Diane moving forward. It'll be interesting to see to what degree Diane feels like disclosing her relationship with Tedros and how she basically played a large role in manipulating Jocelyn to go to that club in the first place. But we also get an interesting scene where Chloe and Isaac are working with Jocelyn, and Chloe's encouraging her to sneak in lyrics about her life and do something more truthful. And it was interesting seeing how Isaac and Chloe are absolutely in the thrall of Tedros, and they say that they're not allowed to say no, and that saying no closes you off to bad experiences that might fuel creativity. And they talk about how Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin, how he wrote the song All My Love after his child died, and that it was almost worth it to have his child die so that he could write this beautiful piece of music, which I fucking love that tune. I mean, I used to listen to it on repeat as a kid. But that it was almost worth it for him to lose his kid in order to write this piece of music that has had so much meaning for so many people in their lives. And I guess if you're a total, not ideologue, but if you're a total idealist about musical integrity and creativity, I can see their point of view, but obviously most people would prefer that their children just continue to live. But it's not unheard of for people to use tragedy to fuel creativity. I mean, Eric Clapton, one of his biggest hits that he ever wrote was after his child died. But Jocelyn calls Isaac's bluff and basically starts saying, all right, well, do this, do that. But Isaac does draw a line at kissing Jocelyn. He says that Tedros would kill him. So that's another example of classic cult-like behavior where a cult leader will create like rules or a system that everybody has to follow, but those rules do not apply to the cult leader. So nobody's allowed to say no, but when it comes to what Tedros wants, basically, a cult is at the whim and whimsy of whoever is in charge, which leads to the best scene of the season so far, the big dinner scene. And it goes on and on and on. I can't imagine how many days it took to shoot that scene. But what I loved about it is there was so much ebb and flow in terms of the power dynamics and who is in charge and who is gaining the upper hand and who is getting some licks in and who is scoring points. And there are times where it appears as if Tedros does not know how to handle the situation or that he doesn't know what he's talking about because Jocelyn basically puts him in his place. Like, I've been in this industry for a long time. I want to be taken seriously. And of course, every time she says something, Leia's like, yeah, like right on, like kind of backing her up, which is always really annoying if you're in an argument with somebody and there's somebody else present who's just like, woohoo, kind of cheering for whatever the other person says. But Rachel Sennett, I love and adore her. But at a certain point, Tedros just has her taken to her room, like, you look tired, and has Isaac take her away. And when Xander explores the idea of using the cum shot as her next album cover, Leia brings up all the usual objections, like young girls look up to her, blah, blah, blah. But Jocelyn's very frank and very honest. She's like, look, it's already on the internet. Girls already see it. And I thought it was interesting how, from her point of view, whether people are praising her and defending her or trying to tear her down, it's all just noise online, people discussing her. But for me, the scene became absolutely fascinating when Tedros starts encouraging Jocelyn to discuss private parts of her life, the dark stuff in her life that could be possible fuel or inspiration for her music. And Jocelyn does not want to go there. Jocelyn says, like, yeah, my situation is unique. It's not relatable to other people because most people have not had a mother beat them for years in order to drive them to great success. I mean, you could probably relate to that if you're Michael Jackson, who famously had a very abusive father. And I'm sure there are countless models and stars and actors where they've had completely psycho parents who've absolutely wrecked their kids for life. Even if those kids don't go on to become successful, I'm sure, once again, those psychotic helicopter parents that want their children to be stars, they are a breed unto their own. But I think as an actress, Lily Rose Depp absolutely killed this scene, because I feel like a really good actor needs to be able to kind of project and wrestle with multiple emotions at the same time. And you can tell that she's reluctant to discuss her mother. She's terrified to do so. But on the other hand, it's a relief to acknowledge all the horrible abuse. And I thought that the scene was really interesting when Tedros looks at Xander and he's like, how come nobody ever said anything? How come you didn't stand up for her? And Xander's saying, like, well, under the circumstances, we felt like we were doing all that we could. But obviously, it seems like everybody was in on the fact that without the domineering mother to drive Jocelyn to those heights through physical abuse, that the train would stop running on time and that the gravy train would be over and that everybody wouldn't get paid. And so everybody was complicit in that abuse. And the only thing that made the abuse stop was the fact that when she started taking chemotherapy, she was too weak to swing the brush. And then the scene gets really dark when Tedros asks her to go get the brush. And I just felt this deep swell of pity for the character of Jocelyn, seeing the tears going down her eyes where she dreads the pain she's about to experience, but at the same time, she's kind of craving it in her own way because she feels like it'll help her get through this, the equivalent of writer's block, and start writing music again. And then we have a scene of just classic emotional abuse where we see him paddling her and her crying and then lovingly washing her off, and she's thanking him for taking care of her. I mean, this is obviously a cycle that she can't break free of, and it's unhealthy and it's gross and it's disturbing, but it's also like a tool that she needs in order to break through creatively. I predict moving forward that she's going to find a way to kind of turn the tables on him, and she's going to have a breakthrough where she's able to access that creativity in his absence, and that he's basically going to be left with nothing because he doesn't bring much to the table apart from the fact that he knows how to manipulate her. But if he ends up inadvertently making her a stronger person on his own in his absence, well, she would no longer have any need for him, especially if Destiny ends up having him killed as she threatens to do in the teaser for the next episode. So I'm excited to see where the next episode goes. I suspect they'll make a hit song or a couple hit songs, and then Nikki will be kind of left scratching her head like, oh my God, like I bet on Diane when Jocelyn was ready to pop and become, as Xander says, like just a really nasty, kick-ass pop star. But just on the basis of counter-programming alone, this show has got me on the hook. I see a lot of popcorn movies and roller coaster movies in the theater, and I enjoy those kinds of movies, but at the same time, in my media diet, I need some kind of scandalous, sleazy, naughty content as well, just to kind of balance things out. So I'm in. I hope everybody else is enjoying it. But if people are absolutely loathing and despising it, fair play. The show has plenty of flaws. And even if I don't agree about which flaws those are, I just like the fact that we've got adult content to debate for at least for the next couple of weeks before, I guess, kind of the summer doldrums. Like the summer movie season will draw down, and then we'll have like basically all of August off with nothing to talk about until like New York Film Festival and the fall movie season and all the art house movies, and then obviously the fall TV season and that sort of thing. But I'm officially getting off topic, so it's time to wrap this sucker up. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I've been loving reading all the comments over the last couple of weeks where I've been seeing a wide range of responses to this show, which I think is totally justifiable. And I can't thank you enough for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that notification bell to be notified about future content. But I hope everybody has a great week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.